And welcome to another post-game edition of Spits and Suds as we wind down 2024 and a nice statement game tonight in the Windy City. Hi, everybody. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan, joined tonight by a terrific author of starsthoughts.com. We talk about it all the time on Spits and Suds. It needs to be part of your daily Stars deep dive reading. It's the greatness of Robert Tiffin as the Stars fall behind 1-0, but then score 5 straight goals en route to a 5-1 victory at the barn in Chicago. And Robert, considering what happened the last time these two teams played in Chicago, kind of a nice win tonight.
Yeah, I think that had to be in the back of the coaches' minds a little bit, especially after the bad loss against Minnesota. Just they absolutely can't spiral and have this game go sideways. So I wonder if that's why they started Ottinger, even though it feels kind of like the Smith is due, right? They don't want Smith to go in and kind of have those thoughts in the back of his mind from the Chicago game he started. So yeah, they had to do something, and they exercised those demons tonight, I think.
So the news prior to the game, we'll start with that, is that the Stars will likely be fined a certain amount for the way I thought Emily Kaplan did a kind of a nice job talking about it tonight on ESPN. But you tell us what you've learned, Robert, because the understanding was it was the ice time was there, but per the CBA, you're not even allowed to give players open ice time. Basically, you have to lock the doors, and unless they want to go on the local pond and they organize it between themselves, and whether or not a coach was there, there's just a lot of details. And this is fascinating to me, Robert, because a couple of years ago, the Toronto Maple Leafs left for a road trip too early, and they got a pretty stiff penalty. So I'm expecting the Stars to get the same.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because the penalty for the Leafs was $100,000, and that was a situation where the Leafs, in conversation with their players, the players all said, "Yeah, we'd rather fly out the night before, even though it's technically a blackout day or whatever, December 26th. We'd rather fly out that night as opposed to having to get up super early like the Wild did on Friday and do everything and do a show and go." I think as Mike Russo called it, show and go on the same day. So they kind of knew that was probably coming in Toronto. Whereas this is a case, this wasn't something that was done to like accommodate anyone as far as we can tell. What happened is that Pete DeBoer kind of actually tattled on himself a little bit at morning skate on December 27th. So before the Wild, before the Wild game, I'm there in the room with a few folks, and including a couple of Wild reporters. And DeBoer said, and the exact quote was, "This is December 27th, so the day before was supposed to be a blackout day as part of that 3-day break." Quote, "I was at the rink yesterday. We had an optional, and of course the young guys all show up for the optionals, which they're supposed to do," said DeBoer, and you kind of chuckle, right? But as I started walking in, up front you've got Bork and Beck and Stankova. Anyway, he mentions a bunch of guys who were there because the original question from Mike Heika was about incorporating the youth in the lineup. But he mentions, number one, I was at the rink yesterday. We had an optional. The young guys all show up, but as I started walking in, up front you've got Bork and Beck and Stankova. So he says very clearly he was at the rink and we had an optional. He doesn't say I was at the rink and I saw guys skating. He said we had an optional. So the next day, I asked him about it again at practice the following day. After I'd actually written the story, I don't like to toot my own horn much, but I was the first person to publish anything about this yesterday.
Yeah, you were.
Right before practice, actually, and the statement from the team at the time was they were looking into it, and they were, gonna check on it. And by the time DeBoer, we talked to DeBoer after practice, which was around 12:30 or so. It was clear that the NHL was looking into it too. So DeBoer's quote then, when I asked him about it, and I said, "Okay, so yesterday you mentioned, or at morning skate yesterday, you had mentioned that you guys had optional on the 26th. And before I could finish the question, he said, "Optional, yeah, voluntary ice." That's the phrase that he used, voluntary ice. And you wonder if maybe that was a clear, what's the best thing I can kind of say, or the best way I can couch it? Voluntary ice. And then I asked, okay, is that something that was like planned beforehand? Was it spur of the moment? And then he said, "Well, I'm assuming if the league's looking into it, I made a mistake somewhere there. we'll see what the investigation comes up with. And that's all he had to say about it. So you can call it an optional, as he did originally. He said we had an optional and the young guys are supposed to show up for those. So he said originally that it was an optional practice that the young guys were supposed to show up for. So even if you change that to voluntary ice, that also actually is still not okay. And the league, there's a memo that goes out to all the GMs. The most recent development on this is Elliot Friedman mentioned that every year it's kind of customary. He said this last night on Hockey Night in Canada during the second intermission. Elliot Friedman says it's kind of customary for a memo to go out to all the GMs right before the Christmas break, just as a reminder saying, hey, remember these 3 days are supposed to be, blackout days. So you can't even provide ice time to players. It needs to be a day off. And I have to think that's specifically because, the young players will feel obligated. If the team says the ice is open if you want to skate, then the young players are probably trained to assume that means they have to, right? So the idea is this is negotiated by the Players Association, just like an employment agreement, right? I mean, think of your boss asking you to come in on a Saturday or saying, if all the guys showing initiative are going to be in on Saturday, of course, it's a holiday, but, we're going to be at the office. That's a tough one, right? You can see how that muddies the waters in terms of whether or not it's optional or anyway. So that's the latest. The GMs knew that even a voluntary ice, as DeBoer rephrased it as the following day, even that would be a violation of the agreement. And I'm not going to quote the whole thing it's all on the website. If you go to Star Slots, you can read the whole thing, but it's really clear that those 3 days are completely blacked out. And it seems pretty clear. Everyone's in agreement at this point and even DeBoer said, it looks like I made a mistake. So we'll see what it is. Maybe it'll just be the $100,000 fine like Toronto got, or it might be more since it appears to be something a little bit more done, not necessarily for the players' benefit outright or in collaboration with them. I mean, you could see the players union being not super pleased about this, right?
Yeah. Starsthoughts.com for all the information regarding that. Robert did have it first and does a great job covering the team. And two thoughts, Robert, is I know it's kind of, sometimes it can be play money, but this is the NHL where they don't have the large contracts. Sometimes I wonder, okay, when it gets to Ghilardi, the amount, what's his thoughts? Is it just guys, or is it guys?
Yep.
Come on. That's $100K or more. This stings, boys. You cannot do. I always wonder that because obviously they have a lot of money, but that is a pretty hefty fine. So that's the first thing. I'm also curious in the next CBA. The Players Association tries to get as much as they can, Robert. So I don't think it'll necessarily change, but I wonder if there'll be a movement from players to say, hey, we'll take something else, but we're willing to give this back because this is not in our best interest and this could cause injuries and we're okay. Give us Christmas off and we're okay. Maybe we adjust it. Whereas if we start games on the 27th, but we leave on the 26 road teams and we just put it at 4 p.m. Central or something like that. So at least they can get in the night before.
Yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made for that. I mean, clearly the fact that the Toronto players a couple of years ago were willing to do it. And I think the team said, hey, we'll pay the fine. Don't you players worry about it. We think it's best for everyone. And of course, Toronto, to an organization like Toronto, and frankly, to most NHL owners, $100,000 is nothing, right? But there is an element in this case of, it's pretty embarrassing, right? It makes your organization look bad to get caught doing this. And even if, let's say, hypothetically, let's say this is something that everyone was kind of okay doing. Maybe the whole organization just said, we've got a lot of young guys and they get restless in these 3 days. And, we want to get them out there and give them a chance. Even if it was done solely to their benefit, the fact that DeBoer then said in front of a camera, and it's also noteworthy, by the way, that the morning skate interview, normally that's put up on the website and on Victory Plus and everything, and that was taken down. So it's not up there either. So you kind of suspect that the Stars organization found out that, and you know what, this might have even happened directly from Bill Guerin, because that's also been out there. I think Mike Russo and Joe Smith of The Athletic reported that Bill Guerin found out during the Stars game in the third period against Minnesota, that Wild GM Bill Guerin found out. He wasn't pleased, obviously, because they had all just scrambled and gotten up crazy early to fly up to Dallas, only to find, oh yeah, Dallas was just flaunting the rules and, skating yesterday, you could imagine he wasn't pleased either. So
Yeah.
this was all gonna come down one way or another. And so then for DeBoer to just casually drop that on mic before the game, it could be an embarrassment factor for the organization, right? One where I'm not saying this is a good thing at all, because I don't think so. I think players deserve that day off. And all the players I talked to, by the way, yesterday at practice, they all had family visiting too. So that, those families' travel plans and everything are I would think, built around that day being potentially a day off. I tried to get a sense from talking to some folks about how far in advance that voluntary ice was known to be made available, and it's still unclear. And obviously you can imagine folks were a little reticent to talk about it yesterday, which I understand, right? No one wants to be the one to accidentally snitch or anything. Although again, that's what makes it almost sort of funny in a weird way that DeBoer of all people was the one to mention it. So we'll see. But the embarrassment factor does make you wonder if, especially combined, with the bad loss against Minnesota, right? Blowing that lead, that hurts. It's a division rival. That game stung. Fans were angry after that game. I mean, really angry. And you can't totally blame them either, given the other kind of fan angering games the Stars have had this year. It just felt like kind of the cherry on top of a really sad Sunday. So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see what they do internally. Could be justifying, quote unquote. Although again, that's like 2 full-time salaries for a year for 2 team employees, right? So it's also not nothing, but it could be more than that. We just don't know. But I think TSN's Darren Dreger said there is a fine coming, and he's kind of one of those insiders who knows today. So we'll see what it is, and then we'll see how the Stars organization responds. We'll certainly ask them when they're back in town as we know more.
Well, you can definitely tell the hockey's not the same on that first game back. It's just, both teams. And it was kind of interesting because Ray Ferraro brought up when this, talked about teams getting back at it. And he said, thus you saw so many blowouts. And I was like, well, there was one that wasn't a blowout. But yeah, it was, it's good to see hockey back at, now that the teams have had a couple practices under their belt or a couple of games, it just seems like it's back to normal. Okay. There are so many nuances of tonight's game.
Oh, wait. We have to start with the most important part of tonight's game.
Oh,
there we go.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know what? They've done so bad in December. I haven't done that in a while.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Muscle memory. I get it. No worries.
Host caught off guard.
It's okay. That's what you got to do in hockey, right? You pick each other up, right? One guy's not having his best night. The other
thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. Yep.
We're good.
Yep. Got to fill the fridge back up. Thank you so much, as always, for popping the Frosties. All right. So it's kind of interesting because a 5-1 game, and I actually thought Chicago was the better team in the first period. Kind of, especially the first couple of minutes, I thought the Chicago's forecheck was very impressive and kind of had the Stars on their heels, and they were trying to do anything to kind of get out of their zone and couldn't really mount any kind of chemistry as far as the passing, and we're dumping it in the zone a lot and making a lot of line changes. So it was kind of fascinating. Then Chicago goes up 1-0. What did you think of that first goal? Because I know it took a weird bounce, but I just felt maybe the Stars didn't have enough time to get into proper position, but I just felt as though Sam Steele was kind of put in an awkward spot. Mm-hmm. And, you had the Blackhawks player just sitting on the doorstep. So it was, kind of interesting but I think maybe it came down to quick face-off draw, and they didn't have time to properly set up.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Bedard made a nice play to get the shot off, although I think the shot even might have gotten blocked a tiny bit, or at least tipped, because the puck's kind of on end as it's going in. So it doesn't feel necessarily like the sort of play, that you just kick yourself thinking, oh, how could we possibly give up that great chance? It's one of those, you throw a puck and it's not even going on net. It's going wide, and Steele actually is he's engaging his man, right? It's not like Steele let his guy go. He was there kind of engaging his man. It hits him, and then you can see his head kind of go back after the goal goes in. So it stinks. It's the sort of power play goal, frankly, that hurts more because it's the kind Dallas hasn't been able to get, right? They always talk about, Stankoven or any of these people in the power play, right? They just need one to go in off the rear end or something like that. And then Chicago gets one that goes in off a star stick. And it just kind of felt like, well, of course they do. That just feels about right now. And it also hurt because the penalty kill has actually been, as much as everyone complains about the power play, the penalty kill has been great. Dalton Hill's been really, really good. The defense has been good this year. They've allowed Ottinger's been good in terms of goals. I know everyone wants to talk about, the timing of certain goals or whatever.
Yeah.
But they've allowed the fewest goals in the league, second fewest or something last time I checked. So that's the goal prevention is just not really the problem for this team right now. The problem is the other end, which, getting scoring going when it's not is a lot tougher than locking down defense when you focus on it. And we'll see if they can get it going. DeBoer usually has. The last 2 years, they've been a great offensive team. But when a power play goal like that goes in, it did kind of feel like, oh, great, here we go again.
Just under 5 minutes later, Stars down 1-0. Really, really nice play. Jamie Benn collects his 8th of the season. Basically, nice pass from Stankoven, which freed up Dodonov, made a great move. I mean, an absolutely terrific save. A couple of things. The save was wonderful, Robert, but I absolutely love the effort of the captain with the follow-up because sometimes players, maybe we don't want a player sent, they'll just kind of watch, but the hustle of Jamie Benn to continue on that and the ability to basically, he lifted it by slamming it against the pad, which caused the puck to go upward. But a real nice goal. And to me, that was a really nice momentum stop. I thought they gained momentum in the second period with that massive power play due to the elbow of Bertuzzi. He got tossed, but that 1-1, I think, going into the first period, I felt pretty good that the Stars matched Chicago.
Yeah, that second goal was huge. That first goal was big, right? That was another great play by Dodonov. I think they even said on the broadcast that, I think Ray Ferraro said he was surprised that Dodonov didn't score because it was a good move. He came to with speed. I mean, that's what we just saw against Minnesota, right? When Wyatt Johnston and Dodonov exchanged kind of, okay, I'll set you up, you set me up, that sort of thing. And Dodonov has been so good. You expect that to go in. But kudos for Ben. And, that wasn't even, that line was kind of also a mishmash because I think Dodonov actually was on Hintz's wing in that top right wing spot. So Ben's sort of there coming in. I think it was maybe right after the Hawks had killed a power play, if my memory serves. So there's kind of like a line change happening, right? Yep. So Stankoven, I think I thought it was Johnson initially, so I might have written that wrong today. I guess I got to edit that. But sends in, another great pass, sends in Dodonov, but Ben, they had enough numbers to where Ben was able to get to the rebound first, and he just kind of pitchforked it, shoveled it, whatever you want to call it, up over the pad and in. That felt very good, right? Because the save was so demoralizing. Like, oh man, they get this chance, and then a great save to stop Dodonov right when you expect them to, at least score after the power play, even if they couldn't score on it. So that was huge. But yeah, I guess we should talk about the major because that power play goal by Robertson at the start of the major kind of made it okay that they didn't score anything else on the power play for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I'd take one at this point with the way the power play is going. It's an interesting call because I think Dave Jackson pointed out on the broadcast, similar to be in control of your stick at all times, you have to be in control of your body at all times. And clearly it was not a purposeful elbow, but I think it should have been deemed a major. And by the letter of law, it was. And, just hate for the player to get tossed sometimes for something that was inadvertent, but understandable. And it was good to see Robertson cash in. What I really like about that is how quickly they cashed in. I thought that was, a big confidence builder for this team and really kind of flipped the game at that point.
Yeah, it's one where I kind of thought, it felt like you get this goal at the start of the power play. All right, now the confidence is going to come. They're going to get another one or even two more on the power play. And this will be kind of the get healthy game, kind of like Boston was at the start of the season when the power play had been struggling and they put up however many it was. But that didn't end up being the case, but it really didn't matter. The timing of the goal really did make it feel like, okay, just to get ahead, everyone could kind of breathe a little bit more easily. And, for fans that have been through a lot this season, even with the Stars having a decent record, this has been an up and down season. It's been tough, especially with the high expectations that the team has set for themselves, right? Both explicitly and by their play in the past. So just getting that early one. I mean, good for Robertson too. I shouldn't minimize the play Robertson made either to kind of use the space on a bit of a I don't know if he called it a broken play or not, but a bit of a scrambly play. Robertson, you expect him kind of to make a move towards the middle and then kick the puck out wide. Instead, he stays in the middle, makes that extra move, and fires it past a screen. I mean, it felt like vintage Robertson, if we can say that about someone 25 years old. It felt like a vintage play from him where he understands that a shot from a certain spot is more dangerous than normal, and so he takes it. So it was a great shot and one that he needed and the power play badly needed.
Did want to point out on that play, Jamie Benn collects an assist. A nice night for the captain. Goal, 2 assists, 3 points for the captain. And then the Stars make it 3-1. And the reason I'm bringing this up, Dadonov once again, his 10th of the year. But my goodness, the pass from Matt Duchene. And I was thinking to myself, like, we aren't even at the All-Star break or the Four Nations break. And we could have already put together a year's worth of Matt Duchene unreal passes. Like, the vision this guy has and the confidence that he has, and to throw it across the net like that, and the one-timer from Dadonov, it was close. But, I mean, getting down, I mean, Duchene's obviously a massive story for this team.
Mm-hmm.
Dadonov, I mean, for the value you're getting on that contract and the ability to play on all 4 lines, just can't say enough about what the NHL veterans doing this year for this team.
And how crazy is it, right? Just from the players who scored tonight, Wyatt Johnston, Jason Robertson, even Jamie Benn, Dadonov has more goals than all of them. 2 more goals. They all have 8 goals. And Dadonov has 10. And we're almost at the halfway point of the season. This is game 35.
Yeah.
It's easy to get down on some of the players who aren't scoring, although I think Johnston has been looking really good lately.
Yes,
I think he's finally getting back to, I don't know if health has been as much of an issue. He missed time during training camp too. But he's looked really good the last few games, especially. And I have to think the goals are going to start coming more and more for him, as they have been lately. But Dadonov, man, he's one of those players. I remember at the start of the year, a lot of fans were saying, "Oh, why is he on the 4th line? We could bring up one of these other young kids, Poland or whatever, and have them start. Come on, or this R2 Huru. Why is DeBoer bringing back this guy just because he's played with him before or whatever?" And Dadonov, as he's done every year, kind of proves everyone wrong and just does his thing. I mean, this is a guy who scored 25 plus goals 3 years in a row, just a few years back with Florida, I think. He's a great player. He can play up and down the lineup. I mean, he started, playing to be on the 4th line. Tonight, he started with Robertson and Hintz, and he's just been quietly doing his thing. He's chipped in a power play goal or 2 for a team that has needed every bit of power play scoring they can find. It's just a great play. But Duchene, I mean, fantastic pass. Duchene really is. I mean, I think you could argue that at times this year, he's been the best setup guy on the team, the best playmaker. And when he and Sagan and Marchment were clicking, there were so many times where Duchene was making some crazy pass and they were burying it. So it's good to see him playing with, on a night like tonight, when he also had, I think, 2 primary assists in addition to his goal. Duchene really felt like on this line, even though technically this one was to someone not in his line in Dadonov, Duchene really felt like he was playing with guys who could capitalize on his chances. So it'll be interesting to see if they keep this line together, or if Dadonov drops down there, since obviously they have chemistry too. But yeah, it was a great play all around.
So start the 3rd period, right out of the gate, 10 seconds in, Wyatt Johnston with the goal. And that kind of puts the game out of reach. But you and I kind of had a fun back and forth because it was fascinating, because just prior to the puck, and I mean just prior to the puck, deflecting off of Wyatt Johnston, his stick was broken and he dropped it. And that stick might have been on the ground for 0.4 or 0.5 seconds. It hits off of Johnston, goes in the net. So I thought to myself, what if he just holds it for that extra second? What would have happened? And it's a fun NHL ruling, and you and I kind of came to conclusion, but we didn't come to conclusion. I would have liked, honestly, on the broadcast, what, Dave Jackson, who is the NHL rules, helper, former NHL referee, what he would have said this. Here's basically the rule. A player must drop their broken stick immediately upon breakage, and any contact with the puck while holding a broken stick is considered an illegal play, meaning the goal would not be awarded. Now, it gets really interesting per USA Hockey rule number 605. Any player whose stick is broken must drop his stick prior to participating in the play. A player or goalkeeper shall be allowed reasonable time to be aware that the stick is broken. A minor penalty for an equipment violation shall be assist for participating in play with a broken stick. So that's where it's getting interesting, because you have words that I think the referees would have to interpret because it was such a bang bang play. The first, which sticks out, is be allowed reasonable time to be aware that the stick is broken. I think there is an argument to be made that maybe Wyatt Johnston would not know in that time. I think the other aspect is, dropping prior to participating in the play. And I guess the question is, if it deflects off you, are you technically participating in the play? So had he held that stick, it would have been a fascinating discussion, because we could have either had a goal, which makes it 4-1, or it stays at 3-1 and Chicago goes on the power play.
It would have been really interesting because it's, initially a slash on him to break his stick by, I think Bedard actually is the one who slashed his stick and broke it in half. So in theory, there should have been a slashing call against Bedard, although obviously the goal goes in, a second or two later. So it doesn't matter. That rule, I've always kind of thought about it in the same way as like a too many men type call, where if there's a player far enough away, even maybe if a puck bounces off him along the boards, if he's not intentionally playing it, they usually won't call it, right? Even if he's technically a sixth man, if the player's, right next to the bench or something, they're usually not gonna ring him up. But in this case, I do wonder also, another thing I was thinking is that Tyler Bertuzzi got tossed for breaking the letter of the law, even though, Blackwell came right back after the power play. It's not like he was gone for a period getting checked or anything like that. So there wasn't a serious injury, although obviously Blackwell was shaken up on the play. But they tossed him because according to the letter of the law, that's what you have to do when there's an elbow to the head that causes any kind of injury, which it obviously did. It staggered him. So I wonder if the refs would have felt slightly more obligated to call this one really, really tight if that had happened, right? If Johnston has it still in his hand, turns, puck bounces off his skate, then he drops it. I do wonder if the refs might have said, oh, well, see, this gives us a chance to tell, to look very fair, to balance things out. So, because sometimes that happens in a game, right? We don't want to say makeup call necessarily, but the officials, I think, do like the ability to prove that they are willing to call it the same both ways, which is always, what teams and coaches say they demand. We just want it called the same both ways.
Right.
Which the refs are usually trying to do, I think, although, there's game management and other things like that too. But yeah, that would have been really interesting. But, good for Johnston getting a goal. Nice play by Duchesne too, to be crashing. That's another play, right, where they're crashing the net and just kind of force something to happen. And that's what you need from that line. I mean, they got rewarded, and that's what you need against a team like Chicago too. Your top six should be the ones scoring all the goals. So even if they're messy, bad teams tend to let in more messy goals than good teams too. So good for them.
Yeah. I don't know why it just captured my attention. I love sometimes those rules.
Oh, me too. I could talk about those rules all day long.
Yeah. Similar to the free kick in the NFL, or just those like, what happens if, and I don't even think the broadcast picked it up, as far as, because it just happened so quick to begin the period. And then Matt Duchesne toward the end of the game with a one-timer assist by Wyatt Johnston and Miro. By the way, Johnston's 16th assist and Duchesne's 14th goal on the year. So, all in all, just a really, really nice effort. If you care, the 3 stars of the game were all stars. Duchesne, number 1, with a goal and 2 assists. Jason Robertson with a goal and an assist. And Jamie Benn, a goal and 2 assists. But you brought up a good point, and people will call me a Ottinger homer for this. But I thought Jake made some good saves. I mean, I don't think he was like tested as far as had to stand on his head, but to me, it was a really nice bounce back game.
Yeah. And it's what he needed, right? That first goal, especially against Minnesota through the 5-hole, That was a tough one.
Yeah.
The overtime goal, I don't really pin that on him, honestly, when guys get beaten and, wrap around. It's just crazy. Overtime's a coin flip for a reason. I think you said after the game. Overtime's a coin flip for a reason. So, yeah, you'd love to see him make an outstanding play there, but Brock Faber's an outstanding young player. So you just kind of have to say, look, if you can execute that against almost any goalie, you're probably going to score most of the time. So,
yeah. I just wanted to point out, I pointed this out on the post game. What's fascinating is, and I didn't pick it up initially from the Victory Plus, but when I went back to watch the Minnesota feed, Joe O'Donnell, the play-by-play announcer, points out that Faber was basically on one skate. He lost his balance when he was wrapping around. I mean, he wears glasses in the picture. It was like Clark Kent,
Yeah.
It was really, really impressive. But I mean, I just think the Stars were gassed. You could tell Miro was pretty gassed on the ice. But that's in the past. It's a nice 2 points for the good guys. Well,
one other thing about Ottinger really quickly. Before the game, I was a little bit kind of, I don't know if critical is the right word, but Ottinger has been used so much, and even the coaching staff's talked about how, DeSmith had the flu for a while, and so we had to use him more than we wanted to, and so to use him again against a team the Stars should absolutely beat, even though obviously they didn't. In a vacuum, I kind of felt like, man, I'd really like to see him get a little bit more rest, but throwing him back out there to get a chance to kind of atone for that Minnesota game, not that he's the primary culprit by a long shot for that game, but just to give him a chance to build confidence after that game. And he's a confident guy, as any goalie, of his caliber is. But I think it worked out. It ended up working out really well for him and for the Stars, even though, like you said, it wasn't his toughest game. There were some scrambles and there were some broken plays and things. And he was very steady and made sure the Stars stayed, didn't have to chase the game really beyond the first period. And that's what you need.
Yeah. All right. We move on to, we'll get your tweets in just a second, but did want to preview the Sabres. And back on October 22nd, when the Stars were East Coast, back home for a game, and then back out to the East Coast, and then head to Finland and back from Finland, they did take a stop in Buffalo and lost to the Sabres by the score of 4-2. Buffalo has won 3 straight, so loss earlier for Buffalo. And then this game coming up where the Sabres are pretty hot right now. This is going to be an interesting test. And we all kind of look at a couple of teams in the NHL and say, why not this year? And Buffalo is one of those teams. Ottawa, it seems, is one of those teams, although Ottawa right now is in the playoff picture. Buffalo is at the very bottom, but at the bottom of the Eastern division. Atlantic division. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm kind of interested in this test, and I'm kind of interested to see if the Stars can kind of get back their home legs after a real strong, dominant start at home. Just hasn't been the same as of late. So it'll be an interesting test on New Year's Eve.
Who do you think plays in goal for Dallas against Buffalo?
Boy, that is a great question, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to avoid. I'm just kind of looking.
No, I ask it for a reason. So I'm genuinely curious because I'm not sure.
Then they're home against the Senators,
right?
And then they have Utah on Saturday.
And DeSmith so far has beaten Utah twice.
Yeah,
so I suspect, based on what Jeff Reese has done before, I suspect that game is probably going to be DeSmith's again against Utah. So I don't think you'd really want to play him back to back against the Senators on Thursday and then Utah on Saturday.
Yeah. I think you go DeSmith if you're asking DeSmith, Ottinger, DeSmith.
That's kind of what I think I'd be tempted to do. The only thing is that New Year's Eve game is a little bit of an event.
Yes.
And Ottinger just won, so I'm sure he wants the game. I mean, he wants every game, as he said.
Yeah.
But if you play Ottinger against the Sabres, then who you play against Ottawa? Because DeSmith probably is going against Utah. So do you play DeSmith back to back? Or do you go DeSmith, Ottinger? It'll be interesting to see. I just think it's an interesting discussion, and that's why initially I was thinking it made more sense to go DeSmith tonight, Ottinger against Buffalo, and then maybe Ottinger again against Ottawa. Because right now there's a chance Ottinger could have to play, 4 games in a row or 5 games in a row or something before DeSmith plays against Utah. So I think you'd want to avoid that. But then again, they haven't shied away from using Ottinger a lot this year, so we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. And these next two games are interesting because the Sabres and Ottawa have played really well against this Stars team.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ottawa swept them last year.
That
Um,
sounds right. Didn't they have
yeah,
some debacle against Ottawa? My
yeah,
memory is telling me that it was a
yeah.
really bad
So,
game.
and Ottawa is playing really well this year too. So a couple of East teams that could give you some issues at home. But yeah, I think you're right. If Ottinger calls this game and says, "I want to play on New Year's Eve," I think you got to let him play. But otherwise, I think you go to Smith and just say, hey, we're going to give you a rest because you're right. He has been playing a lot of minutes.
I mean, this is right around the time he got hurt last year too. And
Yeah,
goaltending is such the way it's played nowadays, and especially with a bigger guy like Ottinger. I mean, he's young, right? But it is so hard. I mean, I know Sean talks about it all the time. It is so hard on the body, the
yeah,
goaltending position, even if you're not actively making the save. And if this is really a year where they think they need to go for it, I just worry sometimes that they could be wearing him down a little bit prematurely, even if he doesn't notice it or think it. We know the stats that players are humans, and when you ride someone for a long time, that goalie can more likely to get hurt or who knows what. So we'll see how it works out. None of us has a crystal ball, and the Stars know more than any of us do about how the goalies are doing health wise. But
yeah, yeah. And
discussion.
clearly, Hellebuck will likely get the first start in the Four Nations, but Ottinger will get some. He's going to be practicing and he's going to be getting in games. So
You think so? Yeah.
yeah, so that's going to be interesting as well. All right, let's get some Twitter feedback. And you guys are always awesome. Let's see where we are tonight. And of course, the host did not bring a Frosty to crack, and he did not have Twitter up, but now we do. Michael Moore says, "Good to get back in the W column." That said, this team feels like it's not playing loose. I think adding a forward will help, but we need Robo to be like tonight, shoot first, pass second. I just feel like this team is playing not to lose instead of playing to win. Let me add on that the New York Islanders are really, really struggling. And I'm looking at that forward, Brock Nelson, and I'm saying, okay, is that a possibility? I mean, I don't know, but then I see performances like tonight, and I'm like, okay, you can hold Jim Nill. It's like a roller coaster ride. I just feel they probably need to do something. The question is what do you give up? And I think that's going to be the biggest. I think teams are going to want draft pick assets or they want one of the young guns.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally agree.
So that's going to be kind of, I don't know. I personally feel as though if you can give up draft assets, you would certainly do that first, because Maverick Bork's certainly playing better. Chris Stabkoven says, definitely nice to see Otter bounce back and the offense bounce back in this one. My question is, any chance we see any moves made to shore up that offense in the upcoming weeks, especially with the Marchment being out possibly long term? Yeah, let's talk about Marchment and how that affects the team, Robert.
Yeah, there's a couple of health situations that I think are kind of looming in terms of roster decisions. One is how long DeBoer said yesterday that Marchment is week to week, but they're waiting for the swelling to go down before they get a better idea of what he's dealing with. If I were to guess, and it's just a guess, if I were to guess, and based on the actual injury and where the puck hit him, I'd say probably a broken nose or broken something. And a nose is such a complicated thing in one sense. Like sometimes say, oh, you got punched in the nose, whatever, tape it up, wear a cage, you'll be fine. But depending on how it's broken and a lot of different things, you can need additional work to kind of get it aligned better. I mean, most people know this, and we're not doctors here, but you breathe through your nose a lot of the time. And it's hard to play hockey at your best when breathing is not easy. So, yeah. Obviously, if that's the case, again, I'm not saying it is. If that's the case, then it could be tricky. If it's something else like an orbital bone or something, then there's other factors that go into that. Obviously, Marchment's going to want to get back as soon as possible, but week to week means Justin Ritzkovian is going to be up for at least a little while, I would assume. I don't think there's another player down there that they're itching to get up instead. I think Ritzkovian has kind of earned a shot, and
Mm-hmm.
tonight was a night with so much special teams where it's hard to really say anything other than he looked fine in the chances he got. He looked totally fine. It's a first NHL game, good for him. Great story, undrafted, worked his way up the league. Really cool to see him getting his first NHL game. I think they flew his family in too from Quebec, so that was really cool. Dumba is the other thing. Matt Dumba is practicing again. I actually got to talk to him yesterday briefly, and he's hoping to get back as soon as possible. DeBoer has said he's close, but not quite ready yet. So they've been kind of nebulous about that, but he's getting there. He's practicing with a bubble. So when he comes back, the Stars would then be carrying 8 defensemen if Liam Bichsel stays up, which for cap space accrual, they usually haven't liked to do. So there's a lot there. If they made a huge move where they actually had to put Sagan on LTIR, then the cap space accrual stops. Then there's really no reason not to carry a full roster. So at that point, yeah, sure, carry 8 defensemen all year. It doesn't matter. So if they make a big move, that could kind of line up with that and make it not a big deal. But yes, I think given what we've seen, it's nice for the offense to put up 5 against Ottawa, or against Chicago. But unless Dallas really starts to look like their old selves when it comes to offense, I do think you can't wait until March 7th to help out the offense. I think even if no other reason than just to like add something into the room, bringing in a guy, getting some help of some kind, that's always a spark, right? That always gives your room a little bit of a bump. At least that's the way players talk about it. So I'm hard pressed to say that they can just sit by and wait, especially if Marchment's out for weeks. I just don't know that they can roll with this lineup without getting help from somewhere before long. Especially if none of the young guys. Stankoven continues his drought. If Maverick Bourque doesn't start to score more, then they'll have to do something. What that is, well, there's a lot to discuss there. But yeah, I think yes is more likely than no, that some forward help will be gotten soon. But how big of a move it is depends on a lot of different things.
I'm thinking that they have to take 8 because I don't know how from a PR standpoint, which I know teams don't care about, but I mean, Bichsel really has not shown you anything that would make it worthy to send him down. And if you put Dumba instead, and this is not a shot against Matt Dumba, but is your defense, as good? Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because like here we are, and we're talking about all these aspects, and the one thing about defensively that we mentioned tonight is you mentioned that fewest goals allowed, and that not only Ottinger and DeSmith, that's defensively as well. And it just feels as though like tonight, like that defense was nicely settled down, and it just seems as though they're playing with a lot of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Even Nils Lundqvist, we're not talking about Nils Lundqvist this year. It's fascinating to see. I mean, I feel as though
that's a really good thing for him.
Yeah, I mean, and kudos to him. I just feel like he's now carved out an NHL career, based on that. Okay, Christopher DeHardy says, I was at the game, still don't know how Robo got that power play goal. It was a real nice goal. It was great to get those final 2 goals because keeping late leads has been an issue. Great job by Otter. That's the bounce back he needed. Time to head to Indianapolis. Look forward to listening to this one. Wonder if he's going to see the Indianapolis Ice.
Yeah, he probably is.
Probably going for work, if so, or going for another reason, but stick tap to you and safe travels. Christopher, always appreciate your participation. Bubba Knocker, what a great name. Really good to get a couple of guys monkey off their backs in the power play. Finally getting one is always good. Also liked how Bichsel and Lundqvist looked, especially Bichsel. Even Ferraro pointed out how nicely Bichsel moved. Wonder what the plan is when Dumba returns. I got to say about Ray Ferraro, I think he does a really nice job. And
he's great.
He's great. And the fascinating aspect is people forget how darn good of a player he was. When these guys are good broadcasters, people forget like, wow, these guys were great NHLers as well. And he does a great job. And there was a part of Bichsel that, because you and I had talked about how he loves the physicality, how he's spoken about that. And there was a point in this game where Maroon, said, let's go. And he denied it. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. And that shows a sense of maturity as far as, I mean, I don't want to say it's a badge of honor, but that's kind of a guy that, as a rookie, you want to say, okay, how do I stand up against, kind of a guy that's won Stanley Cups, a guy that doesn't mind dropping the mitts. But I thought it was very, very smart by the defenseman and not taking any fights yet.
Yeah, I think that's an understanding too of I think, well, the game situation also that obviously Chicago has a lot more to gain from that fight than Dallas does, especially the game being in Chicago, right? Also, you're a defenseman, so just traditionally having a fourth line forward take a defenseman into the box is a win for the other team also. And it also is just, it kind of speaks to Leon Bischel's kind of attitude that, Sean wrote about months ago. About his kind of just, I think he called it like an FU type attitude of just basically he is going to do his own thing, whether it's going back and playing overseas for a little bit when even the organization might not love it, or how he goes about his business, whether or not he drops the gloves, he's gonna do his thing, and he is very confident that'll work out for him. And this is a case where I think you saw that wisdom, because I think I'm okay calling it that. It's a wise choice there, not to give Maroon what he wants. Maroon in this game, of course, Stars fans remember him from that crushing goal in 2019 against St. Louis. But, well, yeah, that hit against Bork at the end, that extra forearm. I think my guess is he's, again, that's not the most dangerous hit, but also anything to the head like that when a player's not expecting it, you don't like to see it.
Right.
But, kudos to everyone really for just kind of ignoring him, letting him do his thing. And he hurt his team a lot more than he helped them tonight.
Yeah.
The other thing that you were saying about defensemen, one stat I just thought was kind of funny because of all the power plays in this one. Heiskanen had more special teams time than he had even strength ice time.
Wow.
He had like over 12 minutes on special teams and like 11 at 5-on-5. In fact, the Stars leader at 5-on-5 ice team, I believe, was Niels Lundqvist, had more 5-on-5 ice team than anyone.
Wow.
So it was that kind of game, which again, the third period, is kind of, you get into garbage time. So it makes sense. It was good too, because Heiskanen had like 18 minutes through two periods, and then they were able to kind of really tap the brakes, and he only played 6 minutes in the third. So
wow. I love that you brought that to the table. Hey, let's end with this, since you mentioned Hockey Night in Canada. Wanted to get your thoughts last night. It was interesting because it's such a popular program. I wonder if NHL referees will take notice, because they were kind of joking about it. Was watching Calgary San Jose, because like many, San Jose is a fun team to watch with Celebrini and crew. Looks like they got their goalie and Oskarov. So a lot of good things happening for Mike Greer and the San Jose Sharks. But one of the things that was happening in that game was the liberal nature in which Calgary was setting up for faceoffs. Basically, the equivalent, if I can describe it for Spits and Suds listeners, if you watch baseball players with the wide open stance where they take one leg and it's to the outside, and that is clearly a faceoff violation, and they were doing it, and it was pointed out. So I'm fascinated, Robert, to see if maybe, since it was featured on Hockey Night in Canada, if the linesmen will be looking at that more closely in the coming weeks. But I just thought it was fascinating. So Spits and Suds listeners, keep an eye to see if people more are getting kicked out of the circle.
Yeah, we know that there have been times where, memos have gone out, or there's been a focus, a couple of years ago, I think it was that slash on the hands was kind of cracked down on for a while, and interference at different times. Different things have been cracked down on specifically, because I don't know if it's Steve Walcom or whoever's kind of the head of the NHL referees, but they will send out memos. And they also, I think, this is bad reporting by me, but I believe I've heard before that the officials also get some kind of report or breakdown after every game they do, where they talk through or go through it and everything. Yeah. That's pretty crazy to have that blatant of a violation.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was just interesting. I just figured we'd, end on that. That's, to me, it's pretty fascinating. So, Spits and Suds listeners, just keep an eye on that in the next couple of games. Could happen to the Stars, or it could happen to another team. Sure. Hey, listen, Robert Tiffin is awesome at starsthoughts.com, and here's why. Because you can go there daily, and just like he broke the news the other day, when he talked to Pete DeBoer and then took the DeBoer quote and put it on starsthoughts.com. It's just a great daily way to figure out practice notes heading into the game. And then, after the game, his post game, and it's really, really funny stuff. So can't encourage you enough. Starsthoughts.com. And Robert also writes for D Magazine, as Mike Palucci has put together a terrific trio. They happen to be awesome as far as helping us at Spits and Suds as well. So just keep checking D Magazine or just check their Twitter account. So you want to follow Robert at Robert Tiffin, at Sean Shapiro, at David Castillo, because when they come out with an article for D Magazine completely free, you get to read it and just encourage the clicks, because that will keep D Magazine going as far as their Stars coverage. Pretty awesome that a non-sports focused publication is putting out some amazing hockey coverage. So I just wanted to get plug in for that. And a plug in for you. We've already had a record December, and I can't say enough about that. And that's because of you guys. You guys are ending 2024 absolutely amazing. I'm excited for 2025. Any New Year's resolutions before we go, Robert?
Well, just for starting off January by going kind of with and without certain things for a month in terms of what I eat and drink. So I don't want to get into details. It's not interesting. No one wants to hear someone talk about fiber for 20 seconds, but everyone should do it. I'm a big fan of like actually starting off the new year and doing it. Do New Year's resolutions. I think they're great. Even if you fail, like try. It takes a month to break or to start a habit. So give it a shot.
Yeah. And my New Year's resolution is to get David Castillo to stop saying that I'm a Utah Hockey Club fan. That's my New Year's resolution. So we'll try to make that happen with Castillo. Robert, you are an absolute beast. Thank you so much for joining us and for all your contribution. Once again, starsthoughts.com, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gavin. Always appreciate it.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it for another edition of Spits and Suds. And as I say often, thank you guys so much for making it an awesome 2024. We'll be back with another episode soon. For Robert Tiffin, I'm Gavin Spittle. Have a great day, everyone.